our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
5 Palestinians were killed and many others were injured, some seriously, in an Israeli shelling of the Gaza Strip following an exchange of gunfire between factions in the Gaza Strip and Israeli occupation forces. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas ordered for the protection of the Palestinian people and affirmed their right to defend themselves against attacks by the occupying army and settlers. And the UN mission in Libya will assess the implementability of electoral laws issued by Libya's Parliament Speaker Aguila Saleh. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail from Radio Algeria International. First in our news, 5 Palestinians were killed this morning and many others were injured, some seriously, in an Israeli shelling of the Gaza Strip following an exchange of fire between factions in the Gaza Strip and Israeli occupation forces as life came to a standstill in the besieged area enclave. 2 Palestinians were killed in a shelling east of Bureij refugee camp in the central Gaza Strip, and 2 others were killed in the north of the Gaza Strip, according to medical sources. The tension started this morning following the surprise firing of a barrage of rockets from Gaza into several Israeli towns and cities along the coast, causing damage and possibly injuries. The Al-Qassam brigades, which are the armed wing of the Palestinian Hamas resistance group, published video clips showing a number of its fighters inside Israeli military bases and sites. Referring to its fighters, the brigade said there are of the elite of the Al-Qassam forces inside the occupied territories during the operation baptized Al-Aqsa Flood. The operation inflicted heavy human and material damage to the Israeli forces. Reports said the rockets reached as far as the city of Tel Aviv. At the same time, reports said armed men breached the border fence between Gaza and Israel and engaged with Israeli soldiers. Expecting fierce Israeli reprisals, all sorts of activities, including schools and universities, as well as businesses in the Gaza Strip, stopped and people stayed at home. The Israeli Prime Minister convened his security cabinet for an urgent meeting as Israel raised the alert to the highest level, which is equivalent to war. Palestinian political analyst Mohammed Hamarsha tells us more about the offensive.
The people in Palestine are speaking about a total shock. Everything happened suddenly in the morning, an operation coordinated by the resistance party of Hamas on the border with Israel. I really believe that the ultimate goal of the resistance is to show to the world that Israel doesn't have much power, and also they want a big number of Israeli hostages so that they could negotiate in the future strategic decisions in the Palestinian territories and show to the Palestinian of West Bank that they have the military power to stage a resistance against Israel.
Meanwhile, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas ordered for the protection of the Palestinian people and affirmed the right to defend, or their right to defend themselves against attacks by the occupying army and settlers. Mahmoud Abbas chaired an emergency meeting of Palestinian leaders with a number of civilian and security officials, the Palestinian Wafa Agency reported on Saturday. The Palestinian head of state underlined on this occasion the need to ensure protection for our people and their right to defend themselves against the terrorists of settlers and occupying forces, as he put it. He ordered that all measures be taken to strengthen the resilience of the Palestinian people in the face of crimes committed by the Zionist occupation and settler militias. The offensive triggered worldwide condemnation, even if some Western and European countries back Israel at the expense of the Palestinian people's right to defend themselves against the attacks by the occupying army and settlers. Mohammed Hamarsha again.
As for world reactions, we see that all Western governments in the US and Europe are backing Israel, and the truth is that Israel doesn't know anything. It's a big mistake from a country with intelligence whose state's most important part is exporting intelligence, but failed to learn about such a large-scale offensive involving thousands of missiles via air, land, and sea.
por mar están decidiendo también.
It's worth recalling that 5 Palestinian civilians were martyred by live ammunition from the Zionist occupying army in the city of Gaza. 4 prisoners have been killed by a fire inside Zahli prison in eastern Lebanon after several prisoners started to fire for unknown reasons. A Lebanese security official said the fire was set during a rebellion causing the total burning of some cells. He added that the rebellion began after the prison guards discovered a hole in the wall made by prisoners in preparation for a mass escape. MP Mohammed Wakli has denounced in New York the non-implementation of the UN resolutions relating to the Sahrawi people's access to their right to self-determination, rejecting the double-standard policy in dealing with the Sahrawi file. Asya Bakar has more.
Speaking at the proceedings of the UN Fourth Committee, Mr. Wakli recalled the 1975 advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice regarding this issue, which denied Morocco's sovereignty over the Western Sahara territory. The MP referred in this regard to the UN resolutions guaranteeing the right of the Sahrawi people to self-determination, such as the Resolution 621, 658 and 690, calling for their implementation as it was the case for similar decolonization issues across the world. Separately, the president of the Parliamentary Friendship Group Algeria-Western Sahara, Miloud Tessouh, also affirmed from New York that the only acceptable framework for the decolonization of Western Sahara must be brokered by the United Nations, calling on the latter to respect its commitments to this just cause. He also deplored the inaction of the international community and the inability of the UN to guarantee the legitimate right of Sahrawi people to self-determination.
And now the United Nations mission in Libya will assess the implementality of electoral laws issued by the Libyan Parliament Speaker Aguila Saleh, adding that it had received a copy of the laws. The mission said it would work towards compromise, including on the formation of a unified government, and believes political solutions must be consensual and implementable to ensure a smooth electoral process. The UN resident and humanitarian coordinator has said that the conflict in Sudan has led to the world's fastest growing displacement crisis. Asya Bagar develops.
The UN official told a briefing in Geneva that some 5.4 million people have fled their homes and are displaced in Sudan or in neighboring countries, while half of Sudan's population, 24.7 million, require humanitarian aid and protection. She said the conflict has also crippled the country's health sector. She warned that the conflict, which started in April amid tensions over the integration of the paramilitary rapid support forces into the army, could reach areas such as the state of Jazeera, Sudan's breadbasket, and cause grave consequences for food security. She said heavy rains and floods have affected more than 70,000 people across 7 states in recent weeks, expressing concern that this could lead to more outbreaks of waterborne diseases. There is already a cholera outbreak declared in the eastern region of the country. The UN official said battling a cholera outbreak in a war zone is difficult at the best of times. With fighting escalating, it may be near impossible to control. More international support and safety for aid operations are needed to better access to those in need, adding that the UN needs to reach 18 million people. She pointed out gaps in funding, saying the population of Sudan is balancing on a knife's edge as the country is gradually consumed by this conflict, and the world should show much more solidarity or Sudan may fall off the cliff.
Now in Afghanistan, 14 people have been killed and 78 others have been wounded in a 6.3 magnitude earthquake. A magnitude 6.3 earthquake hit western Afghanistan on Saturday morning, with the epicenter close to the region's largest city. The epicenter was 40 kilometers northwest of the city of Herat and was quickly followed by 3 aftershocks of magnitude 5.5, 4.7 and 6.2 respectively. Residents and shopkeepers fled buildings when the first quake hit around 11 a.m. local time. The death toll from devastating flash floods unleashed by a glacial lake bursting into banks in India's ecologically sensitive Himalayan region shot up to at least 47 on Saturday after more bodies were recovered, government officials said, with at least 150 people considered missing. The Lonak Lake in India's mountainous state of Sikkim burst through a dam Wednesday after a cloudburst triggered rains and an avalanche, causing major flooding in the Teesta River. The flood water caused massive devastation, washing away or submerging 15 bridges and dozens of roads, cutting off significant sections of this small state in India's far northeast. And this week marks the announcement of Nobel Prizes for 2023. These 6 prizes recognize individuals and groups for their contributions to particular fields. The US-based duo won the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine on Monday for research that led directly to the first mRNA vaccine to fight COVID-19. The Hungarian-born Carrido, an American wasteman, conducted research at the University of Pennsylvania on modifying mRNA. They started looking into this in the late 1990s and published a key finding in 2005. The trio won the prize in physics on Tuesday for conducting experiments that produced pulses of light so short that they were measured in attoseconds, or 1/1 billionth of a second. The breakthrough allows, for example, for blood samples to be examined with light flashes to detect any changes, opening the possibility of early detection of diseases such as lung cancer. The trio won the award in chemistry on Wednesday for the discovery and synthesis of quantum dots. Researchers believe that this technology can pave the way for the development of flexible electronics, tiny sensors, thinner solar cells, and encrypted quantum communication. And Iranian Narges Mohammadi won the Nobel Peace Prize on Friday. She was chosen from 351 nominees. Mohammadi, who has been serving multiple prison sentences for the past 2 decades, is best known for her fight for freedom and against oppression of Iranian women. And with this, we come to the end of this news bulletin. Time now for weekly program, starting with my colleague Jamal Salmani. It will be followed by another program by my colleague Mazar El-Sfar. As for me, I'll meet you again tomorrow for a fresh edition of our news bulletin. Until then, stay tuned to Radio Algeria International, and bye-bye for now.
Welcome to Radio Algeria International. This is our program, Inspiring Figures. Today we will shed light on a very important scholar. His name is Abbas ibn Firnas. He was an Arabic inventor, engineer, aviator, physician, poet, and an Andalusia musician. He was the court poet and astrologer of the emirs Abd al-Rahman II and Muhammad I, but attracted most attention of his compatriots because of his inventions and his dissemination of Oriental science. His inventions include the water clock, clear glass, and a device to cut rock crystal. Abu Qasim Abbas ibn Firnas was born in the year 801 in Izarrandunda, which was part of the Al-Andalusia Caliphate of Cordoba. This is located in today's Ronda, Spain, which was a Muslim-dominated area. He was of ethnic North African Berber descent, and his name is derived from the word Afernes, which is a common name in today's Morocco and Algeria. During his time, Al-Andalusia was a great center of learning for engineers, architects, and scientists. Cordoba and Baghdad were twin cultural centers of Islamic art and science. Young Abbas studied medicine and astrology, but was more interested in engineering and making his own inventions. He was also fond of Andalusia, classical music, and Arabic poetry. Abbas ibn Firnas lived in the Emirates of Cordoba, which covered parts of today's Gibraltar, Morocco, Portugal, and Spain. He grew to be a polymath. He was an inventor, engineer, aviator, physician, Arabic poet, and Andalusia musician. He was influenced by Armin Fährmann, who in 852 had attempted to fly by jumping off a minaret of the Grand Mosque in Cordoba, wearing a contraption fabricated out of a wooden frame and silk. The contraption dampened his fall, and Armin got away with minor injuries from what may be referred to as the world's first parachute attempt. Furness witnessed the jump and went on to make a scientific study of the shortcomings of Armin's flight path. 23 years later, in 875, he made his own flying machine out of a bamboo frame covered with silk cloth that had actual eagle feathers sewed to it. His machine had a harness whereby he could be suspended and control the movement of the wings. This was an improvement on the contraption of Fährmann that had fixed wings. Abbas ibn Furness took a long time to complete his study on avionics and satisfy himself on the reliability of his machine. Finally, at the age of 70, he decided to jump off a cliff in the Jabal al-Arus hills to demonstrate his invention. He invited an audience to witness the event and told them that if his invention was a success, he would live to tell them about it. As per witnesses, he accomplished a flight of almost 10 minutes by flapping his wings up and down. Unfortunately, he had not worked out his landing and hit the ground with force, leading to serious injuries to his back. He lived another 12 years after his flight and continued his studies in avionics, though he did not make another attempt to fly. He studied the shortcomings of his landing and came to the conclusion that besides wings, there is a necessity of having a tail to act a rudder to control flight. In addition to his attempt to fly, Abbas studied astronomy and designed a mechanized planetarium that had revolving planets that moved in relation to each other as they do in the universe. He also experimented with crystal, quartz, and sand to create transparent glass of high quality that was used for making famous Andalusian glasses for drinking water. He further studied the magnifying properties of glass and made lenses for correcting eyesight. It seems clear that rather than inventing or discovering stone crystal, Ibn Furness introduced the cutting of rock crystal, an industry already known in other regions, into the Islamic West. This would have brought about a reduction in the export of quartz to the East, especially to Egypt, for it could now be worked where it was mined. The technique of making glass, known at least since the 3rd millennium before Christ, does not seem to have undergone any change at this time. He is also known to have designed a water clock called Al-Maqata for keeping track of time. His other contribution was to devise a means of cutting rock crystal that was only known in Egypt at that time. Abbas ibn Furness devoted his entire life to science and wrote many books on mathematics, physics, astronomy, and engineering that were taught in the University of Al-Andalusia. His book describing his first flight and the lessons learned went on to inspire many more who endeavored to fly, including Leonardo da Vinci. Ibn Furness was the first Andalusian to understand the prosodic rules first laid down by Al-Khalil ibn Ahmed in the 8th century, and he made known the tables of the Saint Hind, which later had great influence on the development of astronomy in Europe. However, his greatest work was his maiden attempt to fly, and the book he wrote in avionics that went on to inspire others. His attempt to fly was successful, and he actually managed to glide for a distance, but the landing was rough because, according to his critics, he did not devote enough study to the way birds use their tails when they land. This flight was often mentioned in Spanish and Arabic writings. Furness made the first known controlled human flight many years before the Wright brothers. Thank you so much for joining us in our today's edition on Ibn Furness. Join us next week for another edition, a fresh one with another inspiring figure.